Hello, everyone. Welcome inside the Red Earth Production Studios for another edition of YBMcast. And today, Matt Shadow, he's on vacation. Matt, glad you're out there fishing. Catch one for us, bro. Kevin Mulder's down with the St. Louis Naturals doing a scout day. And so I have in the studio special guest Greg Uptain, St. Louis Post-Dispatch Sports, right? Or is it high school sports?
Post-Dispatch and STLHighSchoolSports.com, yeah.
There you go.
That's the online version, and Post-Dispatch, obviously, the print version, yeah.
STL High School Sports, there you go. And we met Greg last year.
Yeah.
We were at the state playoffs.
Right. Yeah, it was great. We my first trip to U.S. Ballpark, I had never been there before for any of the state stuff or anything, so kind of, my first foray in there. And, interesting how, the press setup was outside and behind home plate, which was fine if it's, it
wasn't raining.
No, it wasn't raining, but it got a little chilly there the one night, didn't it? You think it's early June, you don't think it's going to be, but it was fine. Nice setup they got there as far as, state baseball and everything. So it was good to see that. And we saw some good action, late night action, but Unfortunately, but it's kind of the way it goes.
I think everybody was trying to stay awake.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, in poor Fort Zumo West, they got hit twice with the lateness. Basically, their semifinal game, if you remember, on Friday was pushed back because of all the turf delays and long games, and so they didn't end up playing that game until about 8:30 or so, and they were supposed to start at 7. Yep. That was nothing though compared to Saturday, right? when we got out, they got out there right, a little bit after 1 o'clock. Yeah,
after 1 o'clock.
They wanted the city ordinance said, got to get out. Okay, so
it's over.
Yeah, it's over. So hopefully there won't be those type of long delays and long games this season. But hey,
and we drove back to St. Louis that night.
Did you?
We went ahead and drove back. We got home about 4:30.
Okay, I was going to say that's a late night / early morning, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, but I didn't have to get up too early, so
I was stuck. Normally I can maybe sit in the venue and write my story or something, but said, no, we got to clean it, we got to get out. I sat in the parking lot and wrote my story and turned it in at 1:30. I don't think I've ever turned in a story that late, and it wasn't, anything of my doing. Usually high school stuff doesn't go that late, but there was an exception to that rule, I guess. Huh?
Exactly. Well, we got Greg here today talking some baseball. He's been working on basketball and still working. The state playoffs are going on, so we're fortunate. We appreciate you stopping in.
Absolutely, no problem.
We hope to have you on as much more. We're going to talk a lot of baseball. I think it's going to be a really good year.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of good baseball.
Yeah, there really is, and it's nice to see lots of area teams doing well. All across the St. Louis area. JC teams, we saw, obviously, we're going to talk about Fort Zumo West. Fort Zumo South was at state last year, too, as well, when we were there. They all had some good seasons. You look back at some of the records last year, and a lot of them were above 500. St. Charles West, I know they're Class 4, but they had a good season in the quarterfinals, too. So lots of good baseball all throughout the St. Louis area. St.
Charles, too, in that if you look at the GAC Central in that respect, I think St. Charles West and St. Charles going to be battling that out. They're good programs. They do a good job at that Class 4. I think St. Charles is Class 5. If I'm not mistaken. They could be,
and who knows? Maybe St. Charles West moved. The district assignments aren't out this season, so there could be some movement. You could be right on that border. St. Charles West is a team that lost to Blair Oaks in the Class 4 quarterfinal, but they have one of their top pitchers back this season, Josh Newell. So they should be pretty good. He's a basketball player too, so he's still playing basketball right now. But they could be one that move up because there's a lot of fluctuation. When I saw the basketball change, there were a lot of basketball changes, and kind of surprising when I see some of the teams that moved up or moved down or whatever. I'm doing this week. I was doing a Class 6 district over at Liberty, and Liberty's Class 6. The school's 9 years old, and they're already up to Class 6 and. In baseball or in basketball. So how high will they go in baseball? I don't know.
That's a good question.
And it's surprising, they kind of surpassed, some of their others. Holt and Timberland were in that district too. So I don't know enrollment wise how they all shake out, but it could vary as far as who's in what class. And, some could be right on that border.
I think that could change a lot of that for Liberty. Class 5 last year, they were sitting in the GAC Central,
right?
And I think they'd probably stay there,
right?
But I think that'd be very interesting.
And that is where they were in basketball, even though they're class 6, they were still in the Central. And they obviously had, Howell Central, Howell North, Holt, Troy, Zumi West in the class 6 or in class 6 in the GAC South. So
I think that's very interesting, because then you got to look at those districts changing. You had 8 teams. Who's moving down?
Right.
Where does that go? And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and it always fluctuates. Obviously, every couple of years they do the cycle every couple of years, and for those teams that are kind of right on the border, you might be class 6 for a couple of years and you're class 5, and you can't ever establish that kind of tradition in a class, right? Where you can be a power in one class. You feel like you're a power, and then all of a sudden you move up to class 6 and you're with some of the other big boys and girls that weren't in your on your schedule or in your district or anything in the past. So sometimes it may make it a little tough to establish a tradition or being in one class for a long period of time.
It's funny because we talked with Coach Hill from Fort Zumwalt East, and they last year they went down to class 5, and it was for him. That was just like, man, you feel like, I think it kind of gets on you a little bit. If you're at that bottom, how are we going to get there? How are we going to progress? We don't have, Justin and I were out at some of the ballparks just on Tuesday or Monday. It was Monday because tryouts are starting.
Yep.
We went Francis Howell. 50, 60 kids out there, Zumwalt West, same way. Yeah. Well, as East, you probably got maybe a total of 30 kids, and the pool is just so much different, right?
And I know that wouldn't melt. My kids go to Fort Zumwalt East, so I know the layout there very well. And they were one who was, like you said, in class 5, and they were with Fort Zumwalt South, and they had a great season last year. They were 22-7, but they ran into South and lost to them, I think, 3 times, including the district championship. It could have easily been East that was there at Springfield, because they would have the same route. And I think, they would have maybe come through that like South did. It's just whoever won that district title game. So, and in the past years, they've been in 4, and, so they've ones that kind of fluctuated a little bit. So,
yeah. And I know you're trying to catch up on this because I know basketball. So let's take a look at this as coming through. And we can't foresee what they do district-wise or anything like that, or class in that respect. So let's take a look at this. Let's move outside the GAC just a moment. And I think some of these are going to probably pretty much stay the same. But let's go over to the what was District 2 last year. You have CBC. You have DeSmet.
Yeah.
There's SLU High School in there, Kirkwood, Pattonville. I think Hazelwood West. I think you're going to see a similar thought process here. Far and away, CBC has the best talent, right?
Right. Yeah, and they were, 21-12 or 23-12 last year. They were a team we saw at US Ballpark as well. Now they didn't have the success that they would have liked to have, losing to Liberty and losing to Jeff City, and ended up finishing 4th place. But they've got the tradition with Mason Horn, really establishing that tradition after Scott Brown was there before him. So they've really done a good job of establishing a good baseball tradition. But the MCC is always so good at baseball. I mean, you just met SLU, Vianney, even Chaminade has had his moments. I mean, all 5 of those teams, they do it obviously in other sports where football, basketball, they've got dominant, but baseball, they've been pretty dominant as well. We've seen a run from DeSmet. We saw them win state, not too long ago over at what's now Carshield Field. In that state final against Marquette. So, they made an unlikely run. So it's always a really good battle. And then when you put those teams in the same district, they hate that, especially when, if you got 2 of them that are really strong. I mean, you got 2 that are 22, 25, 28 win teams, and one of them doesn't even make it out of district. I know that's always the argument. Well, but you don't know that going into the season. When you do you got sort of an idea, but they don't do the district assignments by how good you are. Mostly it's by geographic, things like that, and they switch it up. You sometimes may have those loaded, what we like to call districts of death, where you have the 2 or 3 really good teams, and 2 of them aren't even going to make it. So you got a 28, 29, 30 win team or two sitting at home, and then you've got a 16 and 16 team coming out of another district that makes it. And I know that's frustrating, but that's just kind of the way it's set up, though, right?
Exactly. And there was, you look across the state there in Kansas City, there's that one there as well. Mm-hmm. Liberty North, Staley. Right. I know I'm forgetting somebody there, but my goodness, right. Blue Spring South, schools, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's just that is tough. Tim Canavan's over at DeSmet this year. St. John's, there it is, Vianney, they got a new coach last year, correct? Because the guy that was there, I can't remember his name. He retired.
Their new coach will be this year too, because the DeSmet coach went to Vianney, Dave Stewart. Dave Stewart, who won a state title as a player in Vianney, and then won the state title at DeSmet a couple years ago that we were just talking about. Well, he got the job at Vianney, which is his alma mater, and obviously he can't pass that up. He wants to try to win a state title as a coach and a player there. So he went there, and that's when Tim Canavan then came over to DeSmet, and he was obviously coaching, as you know, at MICDS a few years ago when they made it to state as well. So
yeah, they won his first year, and that's what we were talking about. No pressure, Tim. First year, bro.
right. And they were sub 500 last year. Looking at the record, they were 13 and 17, but they lost to CBC in the district final. It was a 2-1 game. So and then there's one where they would have been a sub 500 team going in, but they play a loaded schedule usually, and so you can get a 500 or slightly above 500 team that plays a loaded schedule, and that's a little bit different than some other team that maybe just made it through at 16 and 16. That's just coming from a weaker district.
And I think Vianney may, it's hard to say, but they may be a little down this year. They are loaded on their freshman class going in and whatnot. I think last year, and I think that's going to bode well for them in the future moving forward.
Yeah, just looking at them, 22 and 12 last season. So, but they, kind of ended the season a little bit of a downward spiral. They didn't get out of first round, right? A little bit of a downward spiral there. They lost to Poplar Bluff, and that was an upset in the first round of district. So they're obviously looking to rebound this season. So it's always a really good battle when those teams get, even if their records aren't good. It's always fun when CBC and DeSmet or CBC and SLU or whoever, Vianney and Chaminade play each other, traditional powers, and they do attract some pretty good talent a lot of times, and they have good coaching. So they're always right there in the mix every year.
So this was District 2 last year, and I think you had two sides of the river, basically, West County, St. Louis, St. Charles County. You had Francis Howell Central there, but then on the other side of that, and Washington was in that district as well. But they're it's so weird where they are, comparatively, but nonetheless.
Right.
But then you got Lafayette, Marquette, Parkway South in this district from last year. Marquette is as loaded as a team, I think, this year. And they had a pretty good run last year, lost to Howell in the district.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They're always a good team. John Meyer does a great job there every year. And as we mentioned, they were the ones who DeSmet beat in that 2019 final. And they were actually probably the favorite. They had the better record. They had the better season probably, but and they had a great run to get there. And like you said, they just had to go up against the Francis Howell team. That's a good fight. That's one where you've got two good teams, and one of them didn't make it out, and it happened to be Marquette. In a given year, maybe it's Francis Howell. I know Marquette was the number 3 seed because Lafayette was 2 because they had Luke Flata, the really good pitcher, and they ended up. I think they beat him they beat Lafayette. Yeah. I don't know if he was the pitcher or whether they were saving them. I hope they weren't. And that's which is always another issue when you talk about districts. If a team has a really good pitcher, I'm just kind of going off topic real quick, but because I think that was maybe one where Lafayette maybe tried to save him until the final, and then they didn't make the final. If you got one really good pitcher, the temptation that you have to weigh it. The coaches have to weigh it. Well, do I want to save him if we get to the final? But you got to get to the final first, and so.
what do you do?
Conventional wisdom tells you should probably start them just because you got to get to the final first, and then you take your chances with whatever once you get there. Because if you don't get there and you didn't use them, then it's a lot of what ifs.
And then you got rivalry too on that.
Sure.
You know, I mean, you think about it, that's Lafayette Marquette. That's just
rivalry.
I had two nephews that played at Lafayette. I understand.
Right. Sure, absolutely. And it's a well-established rivalry now since Marquette opened in the mid-90s. So we're talking, you know, they're coming up on 30 years of being open. So they've been able to really establish it well. And those two have always gone at everything: football, basketball, baseball.
And then you got Eureka sitting over there, though. And I think they kind of get, you know, kind of nudged out a little there with some of this talk. Yeah. But they're good too.
Eureka's always a sleeping giant. When it comes to baseball, they've had some really good teams over the years. And, you know, they lost, just looking at that district last year, they lost an extra inning game to House Central as in the 4-5 game, which is obviously one that could go either way. But, you know, they're a team that's had some good players, some good pitching over the years. And usually they're good for a 20, 25 win season, something like that every year in that area. So, yeah, they're another one. You know, and they like to squeeze in there with Marquette and Lafayette. It's really good, you know, trio. Even, I mean, stretching it out to the other Rockwood schools. I mean, Summit has done some good things. They weren't in that district. They might have been in Class 5 last year. I'm not sure, but they've had some good teams as well. So a lot of good baseball in the Rockwood district as well. I mean, we talk about the MCC, but the Rockwoods usually are able to put out the good product because they have a pretty good pool that they can you know, draw from. I mean, when you look at the Lafayettes and the Marquettes, I mean, those are huge schools. So they can draw a lot of kids out and for tryouts and things like that. And so they got a pretty good pool of players.
I'm looking forward to seeing Jack Holubowski over at Marquette, see what he does this year. But I want to bring up too, this kind of one was in the semifinal district was House Central, Nick Beckman. Yep. We had a conversation with him. He was on our preview show. Liked Nick a lot. He's an alumnus there, played for Howard. He's back with that school. He's a good baseball guy.
He really is. He's done a nice job there coming over. And like you said, he played there. So he's got a passion for House Central, played for Ray Howard back in the day. And so he'll definitely get them back up to where they need to be. And you look at the game they lost to Francis Howell 16-13. I mean, it was obviously not a lot of pitching in that game. It was a pretty good slugfest in that game. I don't know if the wind was blowing out that day or what. I don't remember, but you know, that's one of those where, you know, those two have a pretty good rivalry as well. And obviously when you get two teams from the same school district, obviously meaning Francis Howell, you can get those nice rivalries. You know, North has been a little bit down over the years. They've had some good years, but they've been a little bit down. It's usually Howell and House Central that are the two best teams from the Francis Howell School District. And a lot of times they're, you know, butting heads in class. You know, a lot of the coaches obviously, you know, played for each other, know each other. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of intermingling there as far as, you know, one goes from one school to the other, or he played at one school and now he's coaching at the other school. So, you know, they know each other very well.
Let's move. We're the last district here, kind of with the, you know, some of the feel here, Class 6. And I think there's just as far as Zumwalt West. North in there, Liberty Winsville was in this bracket. So Liberty last year was Class 6.
Yeah, okay.
So
they were, yep.
I forgot. It wasn't Class 5. They were in the Central, but they were Class 6.
Yeah, same as basketball is this year. Yeah. That's how it turned out, yeah.
Timberland, Holt. Timberland is loaded. Holt made a pretty good run here.
Well, when you look at it, Timberland, they were the number 2 seed in the district, lost to Holt, another good rival, you know, those two. Because obviously Timberland is an offshoot of Holt, you know, when they were the next one that opened up after Holt. So that's kind of a natural rivalry for both of them. They were the number 2 seed and they lost 11-9. So obviously you're going to have a hungry bunch this year. So that always makes for, you know, good baseball when you got some hungry kids. And then, like you said, Holt, they win that game. Then they beat the number 3 seed Hickman. 12-1, and then they lose to Zumwalt West, and it was a 3-0 game. I was at that game. It was a close game. You know, they did a good job of keeping it close, and so they made that nice little run as the 7 seed, knocking off 2 and 3 and almost knocking off 1. That gives them a huge amount of confidence coming into the season. When you got a lot of the guys coming back, that should probably make for a pretty good season for them. And, they've had some good seasons in the past. Obviously, it's well documented with the pitching that they've had. When you look at the big leaguers they've had with Tim Melville and Ross Detweiler, but even some of the guys who came after them, they had some pretty good pitchers, some pretty good throwers. So they've always been able to produce kind of that pitching a little bit that's kind of helped things and then get enough hitting.
I think it's going to be interesting with that. And then you got Troy sitting down there was a 6 seed. I think Troy and Holt maybe just quietly a couple teams. We got a chance to talk to Justin Rogers.
Yeah.
A couple of teams that may surprise people.
Yeah, and
right?
Justin does a good job there. And, they were, like I said, the 6 seed last season, so a little bit down, but they've had some nice success over the years where they've been right there too. It's a school that usually has pretty good success on the diamond. Obviously, their softball program is very good, and that kind of bleeds over to the baseball team a lot of times in the spring. Yeah, they were a little down last year, but with a good coach like Justin, that they'll find their way back. And so if these teams all end up in the same district again, I mean, you could have one of those loaded districts. Because we haven't even talked about Fort Zumwalt West, and they're obviously,
right.
they were the team to beat last year. Now, obviously, they lost some talent from that team, but they're, always good every year. Eric Goff does a fantastic job, and they should be fine again this year, I'm sure.
Yeah, because you got, as we talked about before we started, you got Whistler coming back. They got Dylan Bates. They got the lefty that didn't even get time. Right. Kenton Deverman, lefty, mid-80s, tough on the mound.
Yeah.
So I just kind of reload.
Well,
right?
It is. I mean, when you got Noah Hargraves, Tanner Perry, Nolan Miller, he was the number 3 guy, and he was 8-0 with a 1.56 ERA. I mean, he would have been,
right,
1 or 2 for a lot of other teams. He didn't even, really get to sniff, the semifinal and final action because it was Noah and it was Tanner. And those two obviously had great seasons, both going on to Jeffco together. And so, they obviously were loaded with a lot of great 12 seniors they had on the team last year. Tons of great seniors, so they, like you said, but it's not a rebuild, it's a reload, and a lot of, they got the guys that are back from last year, guys like Whistler, guys like Bates, and some of their hitters that, they'll still be right there, obviously, near the top. They should be, as always.
It's interesting, and just to bring this up, Greg, because we talk about this, we talk about it with Kevin Mulder and Matt Shadow on the show all the time. These are programs, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just a team here or there that pops up. These are really good programs,
they really
aren't
they? Yeah, and that's and it comes down to the coaches because the players obviously change every year, or at least every couple of years.
Right.
It's not like they're professionals where they could be in a spot for 5 or 10, 15 years of a career. I mean, it changes. You may have if you have a really good guy who from the start is really good. Okay, you got him for 4 years on the varsity level. More likely, you're going to have guys for 2 or 3 years,
right?
Mostly 2 years because they work their way up. You got your seniors, and they do their thing, and then you eventually, when you become a junior, maybe you get to that varsity level. So you may only have a guy for a couple years, and so the cast of characters on the field changes all the time. But the coaches, if they stay the same, that's really what it is. That's how you get the program. You gotta stay consistent with the coaches. You can't just keep flip flopping them in and out. You do that, you're not going to build a program.
Very good. Let's look at this District 1 last year. This is kind of the one that kind of sat out there. Final between Lindbergh and Jackson. Jackson's always got a pretty decent program down there. They're in that district.
Yeah. I mean, Jackson has just got an overall great athletic program. They're kind of almost on an island down there because they're good enough and big enough to be a St. Louis area team, but they're 100 miles away and they don't have a same size school really as them in that area. So they have to come up here and play all the time. I mean, you look at Poplar Bluff is the one that's pretty close. They're the other one that would be similar, but you look at the rest of their district and they're all St. Louis teams: Lindbergh, Oakville, Seckman, Fox, Vianney, Northwest, all St. Louis teams. So they got to come up here to play, or if they host the district, then all of them have to come down there, but they don't have any really like-sized and like-minded schools other than a Poplar Bluff. Maybe that's the closest one. Mm-hmm. So they just always have a good program every year in every sport. I mean, they've been dominant in football, boys soccer last few years, basketball, they're usually pretty good. But yeah, baseball, they have a decent squad. They were the 3 seed last year. Didn't even have to play Vianney. Vianney, as we mentioned, got knocked off as the 2 seed in the first round. So they ended up playing their rival from down there, Poplar Bluff. And so, obviously Lindbergh was able to, win that game. But that's one where, if they match up again, I don't know how Jackson stacks up this year as far as do they lose a lot?
Yeah,
do they have a lot? I don't know. But, but they're obviously one that's always lurking there. When you get it's funny sometimes when I look at the bracket setup, no matter what sport it is. Okay. And, I want to see, I like to see the St. Louis teams do well because that means I get to go cover a game or, or if I like them going to state because that means I can maybe go to state. But a lot of times you'll see a quarterfinal quadrant where you got 4 teams and it's 3 from St. Louis and the 1 from Jackson. You're like, well, we have a 75% chance of getting a St. Louis team through, but Jackson, they're always lurking right there, no matter what sport it is. So I'm sure, they'll be right back at it on the baseball diamond as well.
Lindbergh was pretty loaded last year. We'll see what they got. I don't know. I haven't looked at that much yet. Yeah. But as we finish up here, Class 6 is just curious because we've kind of touched a little bit because I know that you guys cover a little bit on the other side of the river as well. Yep. And there's always Edwardsville sitting there, right?
There's always Edwardsville sitting there. They're always good every year. O'Fallon has been one that's kind of established themselves as the other team in the Southwestern Conference, no matter what sport it is, but baseball, seemingly it's usually Edwardsville and O'Fallon. You may have one of the Belleville schools, sneak up and do some things, or Collinsville. But year in and year out, it's Edwardsville, it's O'Fallon that are generally the 2 teams that are fighting for, whatever class they might be that year. And they usually go higher in Illinois. A lot of times, I know in basketball, they go all the way up to 8. So those are usually the 2 teams. And they have some really good small school teams as well. They had one that won state last year in Freeburg, which I had a chance to see after we concluded our run in Springfield because they had a later season last season because of COVID. So, yeah, and the good thing about a team like Edwardsville and O'Fallon is they come over and play DeSmet, or DeSmet goes over and plays them because they get some really good competition, because Edwardsville can churn it out. That's another one where they have a huge area to draw from, so they get a lot of really good kids. And a lot of standouts. They had the one Drake Westcott a couple years ago who was the standout kid, signed on to Louisville. So they always, are always up there in the mix every year in the Southwestern
They have
Conference.
their small college sports complex over
right. there. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I love going over there to cover anything. Yeah, I mean, when you have your sports complex on the opposite side of the road from your school, and you got to walk under a tunnel if you come from the school to get to the sprawling complex, and you got something there.
Yeah, it's pretty
their football
impressive.
field. They got a wrestling facility which nobody else has.
The swimming,
yeah, and absolutely. And then the baseball, and they actually have 2 fields over there where they have a turf field where if it rains, they can go play on the turf field too. So they got a really good setup for sure.
Yeah, we're hoping we are going to. We talked with Coach Funkhauser over there. Francis Howell and Edwardsville are playing at the end of the season, so we're hoping to have. We're going to go over and broadcast that game.
Okay, yeah, and then you talk about 2 great programs that can occasionally get together, and it's great when you can get 2 strong traditional programs like that to be able to play each other, even though they're on opposite sides of the river, and it's not as convenient to play. You got to drive 45 minutes one way or the other, whoever is the home team, 45 minutes to an hour. But it's worth it, right? It's worth it to play those teams because, you like playing your conference rivals, you like playing everybody in your area, but you want to venture out sometimes and play somebody else, especially if they're as good as you. This isn't the NCAA tournament. You can't basketball, and you can't, get a resume win off of it, but it's still good to play those teams and see where you stand, right?
And, I think that's interesting way you put that. That didn't dawn on me until you said that. It is kind of a resume win because when you get into your districts, people go, man, they just beat Edwardsville. Right. If you know the scope, the landscape.
So, it doesn't count. There aren't people sitting in a room debating your fate and trying to see if, that win is going to help you get an at-large bid or anything like that. But what it does is it kind of measures you and shows people that, you beat that good program or, because they may have a good team that year and you beat them or you came close, you held the, whatever. But it gives your guys confidence, too, that you can beat anybody from anywhere.
Absolutely. Greg Uptain. There you go. That's some dropping knowledge right there. We're going to have him come back and talk class 5 because that was class 6.
Yep.
But you know what? That's the way it is. There's a lot of good teams.
There really is. And that's what's fun about it is there's a lot of good teams. So lots to talk about.
Yeah. And I think class 5 is right there. I think there's a lot of good baseball at the class 5 level as well.
We did talk a little bit about Fort Zumwalt South there. Yeah. Obviously we're class 5 and Summit. We talked about Summit. They were there too. They were actually there last year too. They played each other in the third place game. They both got knocked off in the semifinals, unfortunately, but played each other in the third place game. So could very easily get back there again as well. Yeah.
And not to mention I think the best on paper class 5 team was Parkway West, and they got beat in the districts.
Yeah, and they're always good every year. Another one of those programs that's always good. It's been churning out some good players, so yeah. Yeah,
so we got some stuff to finish up talking about, but hey, Greg, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, thank you.
Appreciate it. Yep. We're going to have him back on talking some more baseball. Hopefully we'll be able to talk with him throughout the season, keep up on what's going on. There's going to be some great baseball coming up, folks. And remember, if you're in the local area, get out to a ball game. Most of them don't even charge to get in.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So get out to a ball game. Go support your local community. There's a lot of great talent.
Yeah,
right?
and at the very least, it's a great way to spend some time outside. I mean, we're in early March, and it's a beautiful day outside right now. I'd love to be out at a baseball game right now. Today, this morning, where we're sitting right now. So once you get to end of March, and obviously definitely through April and beginning part of May, there's some really beautiful weather days. You can go out and catch a ball game for a couple hours and see some really good teams and really good players, and for free, like you said. Most of the time, I don't know many that charge until you get to district and playoff time, which they obviously have to do. But usually during the regular season, it's free.
Yeah. So there you go. It's a great opportunity. Thanks for joining us, folks. Remember, comment below. I didn't throw my comments in there. Comment below on anything you'd love to talk about here. We appreciate the comments. Hit the like button, subscribe. All you pitchers, keep throwing strikes, and you hitters, hit them where they ain't. And we will see you next time.